Dan's lyrics really mean. Philosophers, rock critics, and teeny boppers like to play at figuring them out. We'll be going to the source, the writers of those songs, Steely Dan's Walter Becker and Donald Fagen.
Well, I usually say either yes or no, and just leave it at that, with no regard as to whether that may or may not be the truth.
It's your own hole that you're filling up.
Right, and I try and look into the person's eyes and see what they want to hear and give them, just the straight truth then.
Truth, after all, is in the mind of the beholder. And Fagen and Becker, both New Yorkers, find that Westerners and Easterners...
I remember just yesterday some interviewer asked us something about whether the song Ricky Don't Lose That Number, whether the word number in that song referred to a marijuana cigarette. I think that's San Francisco slang, or it was originally. Just what we didn't know about it.
Well, the fact is that what we were simply referring to was a phone number, so I think maybe people should take the lyrics more literally and it'll be on the safe side. Understand that for us, there's quite a clear story being sprung in each of the songs, and somebody doesn't get it and comes up with their own interpretation, that's fine, but we're not about to tell them exactly what's going on. It's really no fun for an artist to make an exegesis of his own work.
Now, exegesis, meaning a critical interpretation, is not the sort of word you'd expect to hear uttered by a rock and roll star. But Donald Fagen has never felt all that comfortable in that role of rock star anyway, nor has his partner, Walter Becker. Both take a certain pride in setting trends rather than following them, says Becker.
There's a tremendous tradition in rock and roll for artists and for other people in the business to encourage imitation rather than original creation of any kind, with the idea that if you want to be successful, do something that's very much like something else that's successful. And as far as I'm concerned, it's just underestimating the potential intelligence of the audience. It's an insult to the audience, and it's very stifling to the art.
Has there ever been a time recently that you've sat down among yourselves and have said, we've got to write something that'll be played in a disco?
No, since we started writing songs, our concept has always been to write what we think is aesthetically challenging for ourselves, and hopefully for other people.
But at the same time, Steely Dan are willing to make compromises with what they realize is a commercial art form, says Fagen.
We work in the popular song form that is most prevalent on AM radio. We can manipulate that form, and a lot of people think they're just, normal run-of-the-mill pop songs unless they give it a closer listen.
By, using so-called hooks and devices of that sort.
That's right, the usual techniques associated with popular songwriting.
No, this has been suggested on many of the occasions by various critics and people who know him that, he and we should get together and, talk things over. And but the fact of the matter is that our music doesn't have that much in common with what William Burroughs' literary output has been.
Nevertheless, when writer Arthur Lubo put together an article on Steely Dan for New Times Magazine early this year, whom did he call in as an expert on their music? Why, of course, none other than William Burroughs. Said he of them, "These people are too fancy, they're too sophisticated, they're doing too many things at once in a song." Said they of him.
Well, I thought it was an extremely verbose statement on William Burroughs' part. His comments are usually quite a bit briefer than that.
But why consult a writer like Burroughs about a rock group like Steely Dan to begin with? Well, says Becker,
the writer of that article, as I recall, would ask us questions about what we had in mind with some of the lyrical content of songs, and refused to believe what we were telling him. And when we finally did get to read the article, it was clear that, he had made most of his conclusions in advance, and there was no dissuading him from pet notions that he had developed over the years.
The fact of the matter is that the article contained only elaborate praise for the two Steely Dan artists. But praise for them is not the be-all and end-all it is for other rock and roll stars. Because that is the shade of good drama.
It's more interesting to write about somebody who's in a life-or-death situation or having trouble in a relationship. It goes back to Greek drama. They didn't, write about people who were having a lot of fun.
You probably never read the Tragedy of Ozzie and Harriet by Eddie Rex, or whatever his name was.
To Walter Becker, writing music about bleakness and despair is as legitimate as writing about sunshine and hope.
Traditionally, it's been obvious that that's a good place to find subject matter.
Can you talk about the beginnings of that creative process, something that you've seen that, you know, I hate to bring it down to something as corny as you were walking down the street and saw something and said, I want to write a song about it. But, I mean, can you describe that kind of thing?
Well, we've seen fire and we've seen rain, you know.
Tell me about the time you were walking down the street and you saw this dead skunk in the middle of the road and you decided to write a song about it.
Which is the sort of tale you'd expect to hear not only from Loudon Wainwright, but from most other rock and roll writers. But Donald Fagen and Walter Becker don't fit into the rock and roll image.
Of the kind of association we have with the musicians who play on our records.
The problem with working with the kind of musicians Fagen and Becker record with these days is that they can't really be uprooted from a studio and transplanted into a touring band. And so Steely Dan's attempts at performing on the road with pickup musicians these days are, for them, generally unhappy experiences.
It's very difficult to build a band from scratch when you're dealing with material of the complexity that ours is. To get a band together that really works together in a good way, we'd have to rehearse for a longer time than, well, at least longer than we anticipated on our last attempt.
And Fagen and Becker don't seem all that unhappy about not being able to have some contact with their audiences. Concerts, they realize, are often attended by the same crazies who attend discos. Discos, in fact, seem to represent to Fagen and Becker the current state of their art. Says Fagen,
most people just want to, you know, go down to the discotheque and get drunk and dance and so on.
Maybe one day Steely Dan will return to the road, return to those audiences in football and hockey arenas.